and welcome to episode 5 of the podcast of Surprise. Today, super excited to be here, and kind of, I wouldn't say a special occasion, but we've decided that we're going to have another episode in between our episodes. So we usually do one once a month, but we are here again today on the Friday. We'd like to wish everyone a happy Friday. Of course, in the last episode, we did a question of price. And today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We've never really done this so far. We are going to talk spoilers today. And I would like to introduce my fantastic co-host. What's going on, guys? How you doing, Michal?
Good, pretty good. Excited to talk about Mega, Endgame, all the stuff, spoilers.
Yeah, we're going overload today. We went from a little short story here, a little short story there, to whoa, this one connects to a billion different things. And
Let's talk about 8 novels.
yeah.
Let's talk about spoilers, baby. So for those of you who have been here before, know that we have 2 versions of the podcast. The live version that we usually do on a Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we also have the downloadable version that we have on our sponsor's homepage, Anchor, where we have all sorts of awesome listening platforms. You can download the podcast, rate it, like it, all of that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to talk a little bit about Anchor. You can go actually check out the last episode, Aziz. It went up 2 days ago or 1 day ago?
About 2, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
I think it was.
So we have a nice little playlist brewing now, and that's, eventually we want to get, well, we hope we'll make it to 50 episodes if we survive. If we survive 2020.
Okay.
But,
Didn't know we were going there 2 minutes into the broadcast.
So real.
I figured I'd get the hard stuff over with in the beginning. But we're really...
Yeah, we got to get our recordings in while we still can.
But we do want to thank everybody that's been supporting the podcast. Really excited to have some supporters who have tossed a coin to your podcasters and YouTubers. So that's been really cool. Aziz, the new feature that we've had on Anchor.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for supporting us, folks. That would be, oh no, where'd my list go? I lost it. Just give me 2 seconds.
And now this is a bloopers episode. No longer a spoilers episode.
Mara, Ryan B, Sam D, and James G.
So yeah, we really thank you for that. And of course, everybody that donates in the live chat, we'll make sure you get a shout out as well. But for those of you who are, enjoying this stuff, like and subscribe on the YouTube page. And for the podcast part of it, leave us a review and a rating. That's how you help us grow our platform and our podcast. So, Michal, shall we start with a quote?
Yes, we shall.
Yeah.
So it was here, thought starting again. This is Bloopers Cast. There were just a lot of quotes this week, so this will probably not be the last time I mess up. So it was here, thought Tris Marigold, looking around the room, looking at the tapestries, paintings, and numerous hunting trophies. Here, in this room, after the devastation of the throne room, a memorable conversation took place between Calanthe, the Witcher, Pavetta, and an enchanted hedgehog. Here, the queen agreed to a strange marriage. After all, the princess was already pregnant, and Ciri was born less than 8 months later.
Yeah, let's give a quick shout out to the Witcher Wiki, Mickey55, who is one of the captains over there and responsible for some of the saving some of the material that was lost when Andrzej Sapkowski's website went down many years ago. And to our friend of the show, Ludmilla, for helping us get a hold of all that stuff. Been looking over that the last few days, and it added to some of the notes that we had for today. It's very good stuff, extra material, sort of like a Sapkowskarillion or something.
She's been super helpful, especially she's been posting on the Facebook page, and we're not experts in Eastern European folklore and lore by any means, but it's been really cool to see all the people who have Polish history and heritage come and enjoy the podcast and kind of teach us and help us learn about kind of some of the backstories that are being used within The Witcher.
Right on.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a synopsis this time, of course, since we're pulling information and quotes and material from all the books, and so but the focus of today is the Elder Blood, the search for the Elder Blood, what it means, why people are trying to track it, the various ambitions behind capturing the Elder Blood, capturing Ciri, and the people who are interested in it specifically. Then also the line of Calanthe's line, her recent family. A lot of them are carriers of the Elder Blood, so we're going to talk about some of them. Then we're going to talk about the big reveal of Duny and Urchin, Duny and Emhyr rather, and then we're going to wrap up all the characters that were in A Question of Price. Like any character that was in A Question of Price, we're going to talk about what happened to them and where are they now, and whether they survived the series or etc. So there's a lot of different little characters. A few of them we don't have the fates on, but most of them we do. Some of them are surprisingly important. Like the Marshal Visigurd is a pretty big character. It's the guy that gives Geralt his shirt, you know.
Aziz, maybe we should go before going forward. So I think all of us are on the same page of this. There is going to be big spoilers, like spoiling the whole story. If you haven't read through, we as readers and lovers of the Witcher books recommend, as much as we want you to watch, to enjoy it organically and get there yourself. So this is a warning. This point going forward, there is massive spoilers. Like Jon Snow being revealed as Lyanna Stark. That's my only Game of Thrones reference today. Okay?
Wait, I didn't know that happened.
Didn't know that happened. Well, on the show, anyway.
It's Lyanna Stark.
Yeah, Jon Snow is Lyanna Stark. I meant the son of Lyanna. And
well, that's a big reveal. Holy crap.
Yeah,
I mean, he does have awesome hair, but
yeah, Jon
anyway.
Snow is Lyanna. Anyways, so yeah, let's take it away. We're starting. Getting into the spoilers, everyone. You've been warned.
So we want to start with just our reaction. We could just talk about our individual reaction to reading the reveal of Emhyr equals Duny. I guess I could start. I did not even remotely suspect Duny would be a thing ever again, nor did I suspect Emhyr was anyone other than what he seemed to be. So it was one of those things that's like, you don't like it when a surprise is completely out of nowhere, but when it's out of nowhere but makes sense, it's awesome. And that's like what this one was, because at first it's like, what? And then you piece it all together and it's like, holy crap, this fits incredibly well. But how did we see none of it coming at all? I don't know. Did any of you guys suspect it even a little bit, or suspect something?
No.
I'll let Michal go on this one because I played the game first, so my perspective is a little bit different.
So I didn't know from the game. I only knew from the first season of the show, and I was just like, I did not put it together at all. And I was, to paint a picture, I had that the chapter in which this is revealed is already an extremely emotional chapter and extremely eventful and changes everything. And then, I had gotten through all the stuff that comes before the reveal and was just like, oh my God. Everything's really sad, but it looks like we're kind of coming to a break in the action. Okay, I can listen to this part on the subway. It's fine. And then I got on the subway and the door, it's packed because it's rush hour, back when subway taking was a thing. And it was Duny. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, it was like I was actually stopping myself from screaming. If I had been alone, I would have the second I got off the subway, I texted I didn't even text him. I just voice messaged my friend. I was like, what the fuck happened now? What is going on here? And I was just, I lost my mind. I went shopping with my sister and she was like, what's wrong? I was like, you don't understand what just happened in this book. You don't understand. So yeah, it was not something I expected, but also something that does, in a really dark and wonderful way, slot in pretty perfectly.
And I think what we're here to do today, in part, is to show, maybe because there's so many ways it slots in, it's easy to have missed some of them. I mean, going back through, I certainly noticed a lot of things that I couldn't have known. I mean, when you reread, that's when you're on the lookout for these things that you're like, this time I'm going to be on the lookout for clues for these things that got revealed later. And you do see a few of them. They're not, They're certainly not obvious even on reread, but it gives you such a different perspective, knowing what's coming, and it's really fun. And that's just generally true with this series and any like really good fantasy or any kind of fictional series that has a lot of world building. It's really hard to come into it and grasp it all the first time through, because the world building is so important to the story. And if you can't grasp it all, lots of things are going to slide past you. And that's to be expected, because no one's, that smart. No one can hold that much information at once. So that's part of the reason this is so much fun to go back through it, because you're not just constantly overwhelmed by new world building material. You're trying to somehow fit to into what you already understand, and it's just so difficult. But now you go through and you're like, oh, I know who that is, and I know what they're after, and I know what that person's ambition is, and I know this piece of world building. Yeah.
So this kind of a little backstory, I guess, on how the podcast got started. We were watching the Witcher show. Me and Aziz were talking back and forth, and I was like, Aziz, this is the first season of The Witcher. I think this is. I didn't say the next Game of Thrones, but I said the books are amazing, and I played the games, and I said I think you should seriously consider getting into the books, because I think they're signed on for 6 or 7 seasons. It looks like we're going to get to completion of the show, or I feel like it's going to be a great adaptation. And for my Emir reveal, I had played The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt when it got released back in 2015. It's my favorite game of all time, so that's how I started, and then I read the book, so I kind of already knew from the start what was going on. So when I was reading through the books, I had a little bit of a different perspective of the whole legacy plot with Emir, and kind of his wanting to acquire power and conquer the world, and his kind of warping of prophecy and stuff like that. But then me and Aziz started chatting, and we had did a couple book clubs, Aziz. We had done a couple live streams, and you're like, Aziz was reading through the books, and I kept on pestering him. I'm like, Jesus, you gotta get to Lady in the Lake because of this, and and I was trying to put little hints out there, you know what I mean? But I didn't want to spoil Aziz, because we've been longtime friends, and I knew Aziz would kill me if I spoiled it, being such a big A Song of Ice and Fire fan.
And even with that, you saying there was, because I knew there was something coming because of that, but I had no idea what it had to do with. So even with that, I was still completely surprised, because I had a warning, but it didn't prepare me. So yeah. And
that's kind of how the podcast of Surprise, the name came about, because it's surprises. This was a surprise. We kind of cooked up this idea and thought it was a good one, and that we would move forward in the year of the pandemic with a new podcast, and Game of Thrones television, and No Winds of Winter. So that's kind of how what happened. That's a little bit of a backstory of the podcast to surprise everyone. But yeah, for me, it's really interesting, because we were chatting yesterday a little bit about, and I was talking about how the lore in The Witcher 3, there's 100, you can play that game for 200 hours, and it just really enhances the world. There's so much lore, right? And then I'm like, I went and read the books, and I was like, wow, this is amazing fairy tale influences, and the characters are great. And no knock on A Song of Ice and Fire, but there's not 30 POV characters, and it's easier to read, and I just fell in love with the series. As much as I love the game, I love the books just as much, and these big reveals are such a big part of it, right? Like the Emir reveal, you realize that these motivations of these characters are way beyond what we thought, right? So, and the Emir reveal is just such a huge thing. It's like this Darth Vader moment in The Witcher, if you think about it. And yeah, I
wonder how much Sapkowski had planned it, because he's he obviously expanded on his initial idea for this world. He started with these short stories and then wrote an epic. I wonder how much he had in mind for this. Had he thought through some of these characters' full fates? How much of this was he just waiting to reveal later, or how much was it just really well added on after the fact? I imagine some of that might be out there in interviews somewhere, but it's impressive how, because I can't imagine he had dreamed all of it up, just I'm going to hide this here and this here. I mean, he probably already decided Emhyr was Duny, but some of these other characters and all these, filling out all the family trees, he couldn't have possibly had done all that. This isn't, only someone like Tolkien does that much ahead of time.
well, one thing that we're going to get into, the name Emhyr translates to hedgehog. We're going to get into all that sort of stuff. We're going to just transition from that, but I think that we all had a similar reaction. I can't wait for Michal's Emhyr is a scumbag section. later on in the podcast. We always look forward to at least one of those per chapter, usually. But it's certainly interesting, and I think that kind of goes back to the point of what you were talking about, Aziz, some of the fairy tale influences, some of the etymology, some of that. He's kind of hid it in there in kind of really clever ways, right? So
yeah.
Like, he hides it in so many different layers, right? Like, so there's the fairy tale, adaptation / takeoff. There's the depth of the story. There's also just like all these details that are important, and we're going to talk about a lot of them. Like, but you can so easily get lost from what you're supposed to be paying, or he doesn't want you to pay attention to one specific detail, so he throws in a whole bunch of detail. And a lot of authors do that, and you're like, okay, but that's the important thing. But Sapkowski is just really, really good at, like, also he just drowns you in it. like I imagine conversations between him and his editor, and he's just like, all right, so we're gonna like do the battle next, right? And Sapkowski's like, no, we will have an elven genetics lesson. Level 1.
the way he does world building, like the way we're like placed in The Witcher, it's so interesting when you're reading, different epic stories like this, and the way you're placed in, and like how much of the world is already conceptually built, how much history is there, how much do you have to do that through storytelling, through characters. Like that is such an interesting thing with Sapkowski, right? Because he uses these locations and these battles. He's just so great at that, and that's one of the reasons I put this up there. This is probably my favorite book series because it's so subtle, and it's just like, oh my god. He just puts it right in front of your nose, and then you're like, I was an idiot. I should have saw that.
Yeah.
So it looks like Macrophage in the chat says it was planned out. According to interviews, Sapkowski had planned it before even the first book. So
okay, but a lot of authors do say that.
That's true. Maybe he's like, yeah, I planned it off.
Very few authors are just like, pulled it out of my ass.
Well, there's a lot of instances where authors will say they planned something out and then change something by the time they've reached the 4th or 5th book. I mean, look at how many books Sapkowski has, right? I mean, is it 8 in total? So, I mean, that's a lot.
Well, Witcher books, he has others.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Well, 8 Witcher books.
I do just want to say, like, this is really the reason why A Question of Price is my favorite story in this book and one of my favorites in total, because you read it differently. It's a different story depending on at what point you read it. It's a nice, almost romantic comedy the first time you read it, and then when you come back after having read the whole series, it's a tragedy, and it's a farce, and it's like, and the story works perfectly in both of those ways, and I think that's just masterful.
And we talked about this in the last episode about how this is the first real short story that is connected to the Blood of Elves main plot, where that really gets started. Elder Blood, Blood of Elves, so those things are obviously something that's huge, and we're going to get into that too. Talk about this in the episode.
Cool. Actually, maybe we're ready to move on to that first part.
Yeah, I'm actually reading it right now, and I'm excited to talk about it. So let's go.
Cool. Okay, so let's talk Elder Blood. We'll talk. This will help us understand what's going on with Ciri and Pavetta and why all these different people are after it or them.
Okay. The gift of prophecy to the knowing from the Elder Blood is fact. Ida Amian said. Ida Amian? It's been a while.
Good enough.
The gift of prophecy to the knowing from the Elder Blood is fact, Ida Amian said, looking at Philippa. And the repetition in all versions of the legend suggests the theme of prophecy provides food for thought.
So this is thoroughly explained in Baptism of Fire. That's where that quote comes from. This is when you have several of the mages sit down to explain this to the other mages, and it is a bit confusing, and it's meant to be. Even the other mages get confused. We have a quote for our funny moments that Sabrina is just like, this is just way over my head. And that quote explains to you the knowing. Knowing is a capital K there. The gift of prophecy to the knowing that's the medium. That's when Ciri just like starts randomly, not randomly, but seemingly randomly spewing prophecy, and she doesn't even remember what she just said. That's these two things go together, apparently. If you have the Elder Blood, it means that you either always or often have these moments of prophecy. So it's important to distinguish between elder blood and just magical talent. The elder blood is something much more beyond. It's a genetic thing that comes from, well, these elves apparently, but it's not the same as just being able to use magic. If y'all remember at the beginning of Blood of Elves, they weren't sure Ciri could use magic at all, just that she had these magic in her, but she couldn't make signs and do these other things. Of course, eventually she started becoming quite powerful, but
yeah, she can do some magic, Ciri.
So it's it's like someone like Yennefer that has magical talent doesn't have elder blood, even though she does have a little bit of elvish in her. Elder blood and elvish blood aren't the same thing, although they get, they have some overlap in concept. So it is a little confusing. This is a good example of details that are subtle that if you don't like sit down and think about them, it might get, some of the information might get crossed up. And of course, this is all really old because elves and humans have been mixing for a long time. And as we know, elves taught humans magic in the first place. And that's kind of neat.
And Aziz, we have a whole section. Like, we found something cool on Twitter, and then it's kind of funny because we put it in the funny section because Aziz found out a lot of people have elvish blood. But there's a whole section. Later that we're going to talk about genealogy and just genetics. So. Yeah,
I had fun figuring out how much elf was in people, and
Aziz did math.
Weird way to put it, but but it's interesting because some of these. It's possible to do this purely because the timeline isn't massively long. I mean, there's been only like 7 kings of Cintra or 7 or 8 rulers of Cintra ever. So it's not a super long, like you're not going back just infinite generations where you just don't know who the ancestors are. You actually have a pretty clear picture. It's not fully clear, but it's a lot clearer than, one might think. So a crucial bit here is the origin of the elder blood, or the origin of the elder blood passing from elves to humans. And we have this nice, excellent quote here that is part of the tale of Lara Dorren.
Settle in, guys.
We're ready.
The story of Lara and Cregennan is a true story, but so overgrown with fabulous ornaments it is hardly recognizable. There are huge differences between the human and elven versions of the legend. In both resonates chauvinism and racial hatred. Therefore, I will cast off the ornaments and confine myself to the dry facts. And yes, Cregennan of Lod was a sorcerer. Lara Dorren ap Shadel was an elven sorceress. Ain Chevaim, one of the knowing, mysterious even to us elves. They carried Henacher, guys, I don't know.
Yeah, no one knows how to say that.
They carried Henacher, the elder blood. Their friendship and then the loving bond between them was first greeted with joy by both races. However, soon enemy opponents spoke against the connection of human and elven magic. Among the elves and among the humans were those who considered it treason. There were also problems, obscure now, about personal feuds. There were also problems, obscure now, about personal feuds, jealousy, and envy. In short, as a result of the intrigue, Cregennan was killed. Lara Dorren, hunted and persecuted, died of exhaustion in the wilderness while birthing a daughter. The child was saved miraculously, then sheltered by Ciri, Queen of Redania.
So this child was named Rhiannon. She looked so much like Lara that there were rumors that it was a resurrection. So there's lots of magic surrounding this. So whenever there's lots of magic and the story spreads wide, there's going to be rumors and just things popping up that people, their own interpretations, and some of those interpretations are going to sound cool to other people, so they're going to spread them around. So this rumor of resurrection comes up. Now, Ciri was married to King Goidamar, who was we'll talk about him a little later. And Ciri was kind of took her on as a stepmother, and so Ciri's kind of like a good stepmother here. And she's half elf herself, so that's perhaps part of where this sympathy came from. Part of it, anyway, was to save this child, this baby, this helpless child. I mean, you don't have to be the same race as the baby to have sympathy for a helpless child. But it is the case in this situation. And so, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Rhiannon will later marry Goitamar. Sarah was married to King Vridank, and interestingly, we actually get a mention of King Vridank and Sarah in A Question of Price. It's one of those sneaky, just historical references that slides right by. But now that we've done our research, we know where it is. So let's have that quote.
Yeah. I wonder why this one slides by.
And if you want, I can always do quotes as well. I have quite the...
In fact, I was thinking you would, because we have quotes with dialogue, and so any of the male dialogue, I think you should jump in for that. Yeah.
Yes, fantastic. Geralt, said Calanthe, her fingers tapping an emerald necklace, the smallest stone of which was the size of a bumblebee. What sort of task do you expect as a witcher? What? Digging a well, repairing a hole in the roof, weaving a tapestry of all the positions King Vridank and the beautiful Sarah tried on their wedding night? And we'd skate right past it.
Yeah, we just like, who was that?
Sex joke. Bye. That's not important.
So, what happens is that y'all have heard of the rebellion of Falca, Bloody Falca, Falca the Bloody, and that was even mentioned, I think, in by Stregobor, or maybe that was just a TV show. It doesn't matter. Anyway, Falca's rebellion is a huge piece of history, and it's going to tie into a lot of different plot lines, and this is one of them. So what happens is Rhiannon has two kids. That's Amavette and either Fiona or Adela. And then Sarah and Vridank and all their regular children, their trueborn children, were killed by Falca during her rebellion. Falca threw Rhiannon in prison with the two babies, but then for some reason decided to have Rhiannon raise her child as well, because Falca had a bastard girl. So the three were raised together. Rhiannon went insane and was unable to tell the children apart, other than Amavette, who was a boy. So Fiona and Adela get confused by historians in world as well as readers. We don't know which was which. That researcher Fenn, the guy in the wheelchair, says he thinks it was Fiona, but the official story is it was Adela. It doesn't really matter for our purposes today, but it's an interesting little mystery that just adds another level to all this. So Falca, of course, is interesting for other reasons too. So whose note is this? This is a good note. The note about Falca and Ciri.
Oh yeah, that's mine. Yeah, I think it's really important. You know, obviously Ciri has that confrontation with, I think, the spirit of Falca. It's the end of Time of Contempt, I think, which is my favorite book and such a badass name, and I love it. I don't know if we reread, as we reread, I'm actually interested because maybe I'll like other books more, but there's nothing like the name Time of Contempt. Anyway,
that's really good.
Yeah, so it becomes really important because Ciri takes on the name Falca in her wanderings, her straying from the path, which is a really, really dark time for her and in the story, and she kind of disassociates from her identity as Ciri to take on this personality of Falca. And I think it does kind of speak to the fact that the history continues to influence everything that's going on, even as we're learning the history of Falca while Ciri is just off being Falca, and those two things go together really well.
Yeah,
but it's super dark. It's so dark.
It's kind of interesting in the same way we hear tales about Geralt while he's out adventuring.
Yeah, that's very true. The story, sometimes they're not very true, sometimes they are, sometimes they're just a little bit of both. So this is tales, yeah. So this is the Hautberg triplets is the name for these three kids, and they're a big part of the genealogy because Ciri and Calanthe and Pavetta all descend from this line both ways. Amavette and either Fiona or Adela go off, and Adela doesn't have any more kids, so it doesn't. That's part of why it doesn't necessarily matter which is the real child of Falca and which was actually Rhiannon's. Amavette has bastard children, and Fiona has children, and those two lines marry outside of each other and then come back together in Calanthe. So one quote here that we have, that's a good one. This is really early, and this is like the first scene of A Blood of Elves after the prologue, which is, of course, the burning of Cintra. So this is the meeting under the great tree, the name of which I won't try to pronounce, Beloberus or whatever that cool ass tree is, where they have the big conversation at the beginning. And so this is what I was referring to at the beginning, where almost everyone has some elven blood, and it's almost ridiculous it's kind of an anti-racism conversation where you're like, look, we all have the same blood when you really get down to it. Sure, we have different proportions of it maybe, but we've all been mixing forever. It's a really beautiful scene because all the kids, he has this point where the kids are just playing together because they haven't learned to be racist yet. It's like, man, but I'm getting off topic. That's just I'm just thinking of cool stuff that doesn't really have that much to do with this. So Kyle,
it is an important part of the story overall.
You're right. It's a recurring theme. So I shouldn't say it's not that important, because it is pretty directly related, considering how much anti-elven and anti-human stuff plays into the story, and race stuff is really a big deal. So yeah, it is pretty related, actually, now that you mention it. So Kyle, why don't you do the underlined parts and Michal the non-underlined?
Oh no,
parts.
I'm gonna do the underlined because.
Oh, okay, cool. Kyle, you do the non-underlined parts then.
That's the sort of unity, the sort of equality you're dreaming of, the sort you're talking about and you're trumpeting. Nilfgaard pays you gold to do it, and it's hardly surprising you love each other so much, the Nilfgaardians being an elven race.
Nonsense, the elf said coldly. You talk rubbish, Sir Knight. You're clearly blinded by racism. The Nilfgaardians are human, just like you.
That's an outright lie. They're descended from the Black She, and everyone knows it. Elven blood flows through their veins, the blood of elves.
And what flows through yours? The elf smiled derisively. We've been combining our blood for generations, for centuries, your race and mine, and doing so quite successfully. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I don't know, you started persecuting mixed relationships less than a quarter century ago, and incidentally, not very successfully. So show me a human now who hasn't a dash of she hair, the blood of the elder race.
That is an awesome quote. I love that quote so much. It touches on so many different things, and it's right at the beginning of the whole series, so it's clearly meant to be like a seminal moment to set things up. That last bit about how you only started persecuting mixed relationships less than a quarter of a century ago is a direct reference to Sero and or maybe not direct, but indirect reference to this relationship between Lara Doran and Creganon, because as it said in the initial quote, at first people were like, "Oh, cool, they got together," but then the racists came out, and it wasn't just words; it was violence.
We saw that displayed a little bit in the TV show with the elven ears and stuff like that. That was a really fun part of the first season, where they showed the anti-elven attitudes. That's something that is prominent throughout the whole series. It's really spotlighted.
Yeah.
Also currently relevant for reasons I won't explain.
Yep, we get it.
Real world stuff.
So there's difference. It's also interesting that this quote reveals that you would expect it to be true. It just isn't necessarily explained before that quote, that there's different groups of elves culturally. Now, of course, there would be, just like there's humans. Of course, there's different cultural groups of humans. Why would they just be one monolith that all share the same beliefs? That doesn't make much sense. Even the smaller cultures that, smaller races, and I don't mean small like because they're short. I mean because they're less populous, like the dwarves and gnomes. Even they have pretty big differences in their culture. Like some of them are just like to stay at home and just keep their nose down, and some of them go out and join the Scoia'tael. So, it's lots of differences. So, but it's interesting to see that Nilfgaard has this influence from a different elvish race or different elvish culture, and that we also just in general, Nilfgaard culture has a lot of elf in it, meaning like their language is rooted in elvish. That's why guys like Kovir, their full name are really cool and long and hard to say, but that's the elvish influence. So that's kind of neat, from a world building perspective, to see how much mixing and cultural, how much time has passed and how much all these things come together.
Just quickly before we go forward, we have 2 donations from Maura, one $50 one and another $20 one. She says, throwing a coin to my 3 favorite YouTubers. Love you guys and The Witcher. She also says, I love Aziz and Michal. I do too. That's why we're all doing this together. So thank you so much, Maura. We're putting it into our podcast fund, and we really, really appreciate you. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Mara. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's have a little fun with the actual tracking.
Okay.
Yeah, tracking of the blood here. So here is the official lines, the marriages that led to Ciri, I guess you could say, or at least just to Calanthe. We'll go to Calanthe. And then we'll extend the last a little bit. So it starts with Alberon, who is king of the Ain Cell. I don't know how to say that. That's the creepy guy at the end of Lady of the Lake, who's who's going to sleep with Ciri to bring the Elder Blood back into their line, but of course he's sterile and gross and can't do it, and that's a good thing. It's
so disturbing. I'm gonna have so much to say about
it. He's super old. The age difference is enormous.
Yeah,
it's about 630-ish years.
Gross.
My God. Yeah, so that's pretty bad. But so it's extra gross when you look at this tree and you're like, so he was trying to like be at the top of this tree and the bottom? Like, whoa, you're not supposed to span that much of a family tree. One being isn't supposed to be able to like, that's just something wrong with that. So, well, lots of things wrong with that. So Alberon and Shadal, who is AKA the White Queen, they had a child named Lara Dorren. Lara Dorren is, of course, the one we just mentioned. She had a child, Rhiannon, with Cregan of Lod, and he was a human sorcerer. Rhiannon, who is a half-elf, married King Goidamar of Temeria, who was quarter-elf, and that's where you get Amavet and Fiona, or Amavet and Adela, rather. And then Fiona marries King Coram of Cintra, and they have Corbett. Corbett marries Ellen of Cadwyn, and they have Daggerad. Daggerad marries Adelia, and they have Calanthe. On the other end, Amavet doesn't marry, but has a relationship with Anna Kameni, and he's killed for it because she was married, and her husband was not too happy about that. They had Muriel. Muriel had a child with Robert of Garamone, and that child was Adelia. And Adelia, we'll have a quote from her in a minute. On the other end, we have then, of course, Queen Calanthe marries Rogner, and they have Pavetta, and then Pavetta and Emir equals Cirilla. So that's pretty straightforward. And then we have Oberon and Cirilla, which didn't happen thanks to whatever it was that killed him, either Fistech or some other poison, or it's not entirely clear. So Calanthe is where it all merges again. So that's really interesting that Calanthe didn't have any power herself, but she is where the genes combined again. And it's like the activator gene and the actual Elder Blood gene. It's like the latent gene. It's like I said, it's explained in Baptism of Fire. But when those two genes combined again in her, the Elder Blood was sort of reactivated and then passed to Pavetta, and then obviously passed to Cirilla. Now, one thing that isn't really well explained here is, Ciri is obviously gets Elvish blood and Elder Blood from her mother, but we don't know what kind of blood Emir has, Duny has, because there's certainly, as we just said, there's elf in that line, but we have no idea how much. So it's probably not important, but just to mention that Cirilla would get Elvish blood from the Duny side as well. So anyway.
I think it would be interesting because Emir is a propagandist. He likes to twist the narratives of history anyway, so he perhaps would change the history books to benefit himself. I think he would do it.
What? Something sleazy? No.
Here we go. Please do it.
We'll get there. So, at this point, we're still on the yes, this will be on the test portion.
And by the way, our document is hilarious. So we all have a shared document, and there's like Oberon plus Cirilla, and there's like I don't want to read it out loud because it's private between all three of us, but like there's a comment in there and it's really funny. I'm pretty sure it's from Michal.
No, I wrote that.
Oh, wow! Aziz wrote that nasty comment. Okay.
Yeah, nasty about Oberon. Yeah. All caps, like not for you. She's not for you, Grossy.
Sometimes we try to be professional, but we put little jokes in there, and I try not to smile or laugh because we're trying to actually do a podcast.
So one character who really has a major turnaround from Question of Price is the man who needed fists shaken at him, Crack on Crate. He becomes a much better man, shall we say, and he becomes he is a pretty important character too. He pops in and out of the narrative. I think it's Baptism of Fire that he's in the most. He's in a lot, one of the books, and then he kind of just sails off into the sunset, so to speak. You hear about the Skelligans continuing to do things here and there, but his name doesn't actually come up. We'll talk about him more later because we want to wrap up all the characters. But here, he brings up, of all people, he indicates a piece of magic that's tied to the Elder Blood, and from his perspective, it's tied to the Queens of Cintra. But he connects it to the Elder Blood also, but says it's also Cintran. So, well, anyway, the quote will help us get there.
Should I try my Scottish?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, God. All right. Don't judge me. The blood of the Queens of Cintra, began Crack in a thoughtful tone, is strangely connected with the sea. If a woman of this blood dies, the sea falls into true madness. It is said that our Skellige mourns Rhiannon's daughters, because the storms are so strong that the west waves permeate the island, waves attacking cracks and caves until they suddenly seep from rock salt rivulets on the east side, and the whole island shakes. The common people say, Ard Skellige sobs. Again someone has died. The blood of Rhiannon has died. The elder blood.
And
more Irish than Scottish.
That
sorry.
was great.
That was good, though, right? So Yennefer, of all people, is like, that's bull. Just like nonsense. And he's like, oh yeah, I've seen it 3 times, and it was exactly when Adalia died, Calanthe died, and Pavetta died, and it didn't happen when Ciri, quote unquote, died. Which is how he knows Ciri didn't die. He's like, nope, Ciri's alive. His evidence is totally different than Yennefer's or Geralt's or anyone's, because he's like, nope, there was no madness of the sea. So Ciri's alive, and he's 100% confident, and he was 100% right, and that is just really cool.
Yeah, a lot of Yennefer's time on Skellige is like people saying things to her and her being like, bullshit, and then being like, oh, it's true.
By the way, for those of you who Vilgefortz is tied to the madness of the sea. In the books, it's called the Maelstrom, but obviously different cultures see it differently and call it the madness of the sea.
Yeah, so it's really neat. Like this is a cool little way for each different people to have figured things out based on their own culture merged with the magic. And you can see Crack is referring to forces from the far west, which is, where the ships came from, where the elven white ships came from initially. So there's it's sort of Lord of the Rings-ish, where there's maybe something to the west where the elves came from or something like that. It's not entirely clear, but that's outside the scope of this episode, but it's certainly see where the storms seem to be coming from the west, and that's I think it's part of the belief there. Anyway.
And it's crazy because Pavetta senses it. Like the shy Pavetta, right? She senses that something is going to happen. So
yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that too.
Oh yeah, man. Sorry, I want to jump to that part. My bad.
We have to get through Aziz's science lesson first.
Science and magic. It's magic.
Hi guys, my name is Aziz. I'm a scientist.
So this part we're calling the Daughters of Raven, because the official title of royal women born from the Cintran line is Daughters of Raven, and the men are Sons of Raven. And something interesting about this that I just caught like late last night is the founder of the House of Raven, the founder of the Kings and Queens of Cintra, is Serban. and sometimes the dynasty is just called the Servants dynasty because he was the founder. But he was known for his raven-winged helmet, which is like Cahir's helmet. He has basically the same helmet as Cahir. And this is why they're called the daughters of or sons of Raven, because if he was known for that helmet. So I wonder if, like, when Ciri is having all these dreams of Cahir coming after him, there's almost like an overtone of her ancestors are like the weight of her ancestry is coming for her too. And I thought that was kind of neat.
Like her re-experiencing actual history and memories.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like merging of like her real fears with like ancestral. I don't know what word to use. Just magic notions. Just recall. It's really cool.
They say trauma can be passed through as well through generations. So that's kind of an interesting.
Well, also there's magic here. So.
Especially.
No, but that would make sense because Cahir kind of plays an outsized role in Ciri's mind, compared to like their actual interactions. I could see something like that being a recall moment or something.
I was hoping to find an ancestral connection between them, like in the far past, because, Serban's wife was Becca of Nazair, and Nazair has been Nilfgaardian for a long time at the start of the books. So I was hoping maybe Cahir was from there, but he's from Vicovaro. So, I mean, it's still possible there's some distant blood connection, but it's nothing overt. So
not a Nilfgaardian, man.
He's like the Nilfgaardian, who was quite clearly a Nilfgaardian. That's so good.
Guys, the first time I met Cahir, like in the story, in the main section of the story, I was like, wait a second. Is Cahir Bay? And I texted my friend, is Cahir Bay? And he was like, Cahir is super Bay.
So the excellent and amazing Queen Maeve Maeve, I don't know how to say it, from Lyria. Her branch, the Lyrian kings and queens, are descended from the Servants, the Coram dynasty, aka House of Raven. So the Cintrans and the Lyrians have a blood connection. That's part of why Maeve was like, I'll take Ciri and she can come hang out in my castle and I'll marry her off in secret to one of my knights. And there's also rumors that Maeve and Calanthe had a relationship when they were both young. So that's where that comes from. So that's kind of neat.
Okay, so my first reaction was like, yeah, get it, Calanthe. And then I was also like, actually, I mean, yes, but also like, accusations of like sexual deviance is something that like powerful women face a lot. So like that could also be like thrown in there.
And You're right. And Queen Maeve is not your prototypical female. I mean, she's a soldier queen. She's a fighter, right? So she's like, she's obviously perceptively different.
Yeah.
That's actually, I'm glad you said that, Kyle, because the Cintra is known, and I think Lyria would probably be the same, especially with this example. They specifically teach their women to fight and hunt just like the men. Like that's part of their culture. So I think Pavetta was a little different because she was probably encouraged to do that. She just didn't want to because, or Calanthe had, maybe she had changed something. I don't know. Calanthe definitely tried to change some traditions. I don't know if she may not have wanted to change that one though, because that seems like a one to stick with. But anyway, that's an interesting little detail. So, Pavetta's grandmother is Adalia the Seer. Andrzej Sapkowski in the extended material refers to her as Fairy. So that was one of her nicknames, was Fairy. And that's really neat because fairy grandmother, fairy godmother, and that's, to be Pavetta's fairy grandmother. Now here's another quote from from Actual Question of Price that refers to her.
She inherited it, missing a generation, and no mistake, said the druid. Her grandmother Adalia could raise a drawbridge with a twitch of her eyebrows.
Surprisingly, Adalia is alive during A Question of Price. She's just off at hanging out with Tisea. She's friends with Tisea, but never became a mage, even though she had the talent for it. And she died when she was 95, but didn't want to be a sorcerer. So she apparently returned to Cintra a year after A Question of Price, and shortly after Ciri was born, and had some sort of argument with Calanthe, and then left and never returned. So any insight or guesses as to what they may have argued about?
My guess is just about, I mean, I'm guessing Adalia sensed the magic in her, and there was some sort of disagreement there. And we know Calanthe wanted to hide so much, and she was soft in some ways and kind of wanted to change her distance. So I think that they were having a disagreement, and I think Adalia knew that she was magical, and I think there was some sort of disagreement on that specific part.
Okay.
That's just my guess.
No, that's a good guess. I think, yeah. I'm confused. I certainly don't know, but yeah, I like that guess.
Yeah, I wonder if she. I mean, I have twofold reactions. One of which is, I'm pretty sure the women of Cintra fight with each other constantly. It's not very difficult to spark an argument like that. But also, I wonder if maybe if Adalia wanted to take Ciri away and like maybe raise her on, I don't know, with Tisaya or on Magic School Island.
Aretusa?
Yeah, there you go.
Planet,
yeah.
Cool.
I don't know, maybe. Because we do see, Calanthe reacts so strongly when Geralt comes, and like they have that whole mind game back and forth about like, are you going to take my grandchild? Sorry, not going to expose the fact that it's a girl yet.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. You kept that secret. Yeah. So a little bit of history repeating itself in the recent line of Cintran monarchs. There had been a run of the monarchs dying youngish, or at least in their like youngish, meaning like in their 30s, and having someone young take over. Calanthe took over when she was 17. When Adalia's husband Daggerad died at age 34 while hunting, of course. And so Adalia was sort of retired and then Calanthe became full queen. And then, of course, she marries. This is in this short period where she has the accusations of an affair with Queen Meve and some other things. And then she's married at age 17, and Pavetta's born when she was 19. So one other piece of tradition breaking, and this might be intentional. I want to see if you guys have any takes on this. Every name until Daggerad in the Cintran line started with a C. We had, Crispin Coram and Cedric and the founder and all these other people, Calanthe. Then even Cirilla kind of brings it back around. But Pavetta is another deviation from that, and I wonder if it was some choice on Calanthe's part, or I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. You guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it could be an interesting pattern break. I wouldn't put anything past Sapkowski, but yeah, it might just kind of be like a small signal to the reader.
We know that Calanthe has anxiety about all these situations, right? She has she's worried about Nilfgaard, and she's trying to keep power, and she's trying to find a new king and stuff. So she's got all of these worries, and then this added on magic element is something that makes her anxious, I think. So maybe it's some sort of superstitious thing, Aziz, you know what I mean? By changing a name or something, she feels like it will somehow change things. I don't know. That's kind of how I interpreted it. Her just being anxious about things and maybe want to subvert it that way.
That makes sense. Yeah. So one other little bit of thing that fits into the political pastiche of everything here is that the marriage to Rogner wasn't as high up. He was a little lower in rank than you would expect a husband to be. But Ebbing is where he came from. He was a Duke of Desalm in Ebbing. Ebbing is dependent on Nilfgaard. So that's another connection with the eventual ambitions of Nilfgaard and the Empire, because that's part of, Cintra is just right on the border with territories that are very much Nilfgaardian influenced, and being on the south side of the Yaruga makes them kind of a geographical target, I suppose, for expansion. Anyway, Codringer mentions that there's a chance that Calanthe had Rogner killed, Probably not, though. It's a rumor. I would guess not, actually, because of the fact that she would have probably succeeded or tried again if she didn't kill him when he came back from his expedition with Duny, and of course didn't admit to the child of surprise thing. But they were together a long time, and I just think if Calanthe wanted him dead, he'd have been dead. You know what I mean?
I think that suspicion is raised because she does voice her opinion that she does think Ragnar is a bit of an oaf. Like, she's like, she is pissed at the whole child of surprise thing. So some people will go back and think, well, hey, maybe this, you know what I mean? Maybe there were bigger problems than we actually thought, you know what I mean? Because that was kind of a big tipping point for her. She's like, this is our kid. Like, I'm not giving our kid away.
I'm just struck by the fact that they didn't have any more children.
Yeah.
Like, they were married for a long time and only had Pavetta. And I'm kind of like, I feel like Calanthe might have been doing that intentionally.
Yeah, well.
She has a son she can't control.
Don't want to reference the Song of Ice and Fire, but some people are saying Cersei in the chat. That is a common that is a common comparison.
For Cersei sure. With brains, yeah.
And a sword fighting skills.
So Calanthe was unhappy. There is some notion that she was unhappy about parts of her marriage. You know what I mean? So and we definitely see that in Song of Ice and Fire too.
So part of Rognar's warning to Calanthe about Duny was about the loss of prize, but he also described Duny. But Rognar didn't know about the hedgehog part himself. So this is part of the breakdown of the story in terms of understanding it, is what Calanthe was expecting was not a hedgehog man. She was expecting a man. And so she was... Are you
sure? Because I feel like Duny actually says, like, your husband would not have failed to describe me. And she kind of looks like she has something confirmed when he takes off his helmet.
Well, that's a good point. I got this from the extra material from that Sapkowski put on his genealogy stuff. So maybe it does contradict, but or maybe that might be an error. Anyway, it's worth consideration.
Yeah.
But the more importantly here is what happens to a lot of these characters. And most of them we're going to save for later. We have a section of them, but this is too relevant to what we're talking about now. And after the fall of Cintra, there was a lot of blame thrown around. And even before the fall of Cintra, there were a lot of people who didn't like Calanthe because of, she broke tradition. She was a queen, and they wanted to have a king. And, she just didn't behave the way that a lot of people expected a woman to behave, which we like, but a lot of characters in World did not like. And surprisingly, one of the characters who really, really turned on not just Calanthe, but all the recent Cintran women was Marshal Visigurd, the dude who tells Geralt what to do and gives him his shirt and all that. So look at this line that he utters later.
Queen of Cintra and the Skellige Islands, why not? Duchess of Brugge, the Countess of Sodden, go ahead, we bow at the waist. And why, I humbly ask, not the Queen of the Sun and Moon? Her cursed and tainted blood has no right to the throne. Cursed blood, the whole female line of this family is cursed. Vile creatures, beginning with Rhiannon. Ciri's great-grandmother Adalia played the harlot with her cousin, as her mother Muriel fornicated with everyone. So yeah, again, this kind of like sexual deviancy as disqualifying slander for queens.
So I guess it's technically Haxo who gives him the shirt. It's just Visigurd who tells him what to do. Yeah, I got that mixed up. But Visigurd's the one who marches him in and tells him to behave and all that stuff. So in the chat, Macrophage says Calanthe never admitted she knew, but why would she hire a Witcher? It's confusing. Okay, so I think we might be able to piece this together now, because that's another thing explained in the genetic extra genealogy material written by Sapkowski. He writes that Calanthe found out that Pavetta was seeing this hedgehog man, and that's why she hired a Witcher to kill the hedgehog man, because she figured the hedgehog man would show up to claim Pavetta when, as part of the who is she going to marry party. She didn't know that the hedgehog man was also the same man that was coming to claim for the child surprise. So that's what she did. She thought those were two separate people. So she hired Geralt to kill the hedgehog man, not knowing that's also Duny. And then when Duny, while he's sitting there talking and saying who he is, she realizes, oh my God, this is this one person instead of two different people.
And it's not 15 years either. Duny comes way earlier, remember? So that's the thing too. But she had already kind of been on edge about it, right? Like this is something that she knew was going to happen sooner or later, and then she had her suspicions. She's like, oh, okay, well, that's why she kept on pressing him to take off his helmet, and that's why I think she kind of figured it out, right? Yeah,
I think so. So I think that all fits then if we when it's put out that way. But another talk about suspicion of knowing who is who. Here's another quote that from Crack and Yennefer that might indicate Calanthe figured out that Duny was M here, not during A Question of Price, but later. So this is a really interesting notion here. So, Kyle, you do the underline for this one?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Am I Yennefer or Crack?
You would be you're Crack, yeah.
Oh, okay. So Kyle's Yennefer, cool.
We're swapping.
In the burning street, she would inevitably and futilely die at the hands of mobs of soldiers. But the lioness, do you know what she is supposed to have said, according to witnesses?
No.
Better that the blood of the girl flows on the pavement of Cintra than it be desecrated. How would it be desecrated?
Through her marriage to Emperor Emir.
So Calanthe is saying that if Ciri were to marry Emir, then her blood would be desecrated. So that's a really strong language and so she'd rather see her daughter die than marry Emir. So what do you think that's just like she hates Emir that much, or is it that she figured out who he was, or suspects it maybe? What do you?
I think she suspects it. I think she suspects for a while. I think she actually suspects even maybe in A Question of Price, though I have nothing to back that up with. But to me, like what kept jumping out at me is in the Sword of Destiny short story, Mousak mentions to Geralt that like as soon as Ciri was born, Calanthe was like, kill the baby. And that's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
And Mousak was like, well, I can't say no to the queen. Also, I'm not going to do this. I'm fucked. I'm getting out of here. And then Calanthe was like, actually, never mind. I changed my mind. So I don't know if that was like when your grandchild is theoretical, you can be like, yeah, just kill it. And she changed her mind because of, grandmotherly love, or if she changed her mind for some tactical reason. I don't know, but I do think that a lot of what Calanthe does is trying to keep the power that she has and that her family has away from Nilfgaard and away from Emir. And it doesn't end up working, unfortunately. Well, it sort of does.
I think if Calanthe was to suffer from one sin, or we could associate one sin with her, it would be pride, right? She's very prideful. So I think that obviously she shares a very big connection with Ciri. She obviously loves Ciri, but there's also parts of her that, because of what she's experienced, those leads to her anxieties because of her, all of this other stuff that has happened.
I wonder too if it seems to be a recurring theme that people have like dark plans for Ciri that they change their mind on. I wonder if that's supposed to be like a hidden hand of destiny thing, because obviously Emir is going to do the awful and just changes his mind, and so does Oberon. Doesn't change his mind; he just can't go through with it. But that's sort of similar. And if Calanthe originally wanted her own granddaughter dead, and then changed her mind, it's kind of the same thing.
Well, this is a theme that I think bears touching on briefly. There's a lot to talk about with this, so I won't go into it. But like throughout the story, especially as Ciri becomes an adult and a sexual person, a lot of her story becomes like, who is going to impregnate Ciri, not because of Ciri, but because of the elder blood, because they want they want that genetics, and like they just need her as like a process mode, you know, an incubator for the part of the elder blood that they need. And it's really worth paying attention to how many people go through that and go to insane lengths to try and make that happen. And then, you know, well, we're in spoiler cast. It doesn't happen, but you know.
well, one thing that I love so much is, and this is why I consider Geralt and Yennefer Ciri's real parents, is because they give her agency. They want her to be happy. You know what I mean? They know it's difficult, but they still they know that Ciri is going to make her own choices. They don't always try to stop her. They try to protect her, right? From all stuff.
Everybody wants Ciri's genetics. They want Ciri because of her genetics and what she can produce for them. And Geralt and Yennefer are the people who love Ciri for who she is. And, you know, it's possible that Calanthe could honestly be in either of those camps. I don't know. I like to think maybe it was both.
I think both.
Because we have Vilgefortz, who is a worse version of Stregsy, and then we have Amir, the creep, which I hope you're still going to do your rant soon. I'm waiting for that.
Yeah,
we're close. So, just real quick, it is interesting too. Like from Ciri's perspective, she doesn't have. Everyone knows who she is or has heard of her, so she's kind of like that famous, like the stereotypical famous person who can't ever know if someone loves them for themselves, because it's like, well, I'm a famous person and maybe you just love me for my fame or these other stuff. It's a similar thing where she's not just famous, she's also got magical blood. So she almost has to go to other worlds to find someone that doesn't know who she is, like almost literally.
She has to literally go into a legend. And
So it's that's a bit of a sad part of it, is that she can't. It's like hard to have a normal relationship when you're the child of the elder blood and a princess and all that much political and magical power merging together. Okay, so let's talk about Duny equals M here, and we've got Geralt of all people. Might as well have a quote from him, one of the better reveals, and pay attention to what he's saying here, because this is similar to what we were wondering about Calanthe, because Geralt, he figures it out, so maybe Calanthe did.
Yeah. It's worth noting that Duny is like, oh, you recognize me, and Geralt says this: I wouldn't have recognized you. You have indeed changed greatly. I simply worked out who you were some time ago. I guessed, not without help and a hint from someone else, what role incest plays in Ciri's family, in her blood. I even dreamed about the most awful, the most hideous incest imaginable in a gruesome nightmare. And well, here you are, in person.
He doesn't really hold back.
Also worth noting, Geralt is at like one of his like lowest points, just in the story. Oh, I love this so much. Yeah,
that's like right after Regis and Cahir and Milva have just been killed.
I was reading this again. I was just like, my emotions are out of control right now. This is not even okay.
Yeah, when I was just like looking for quotes and trying to find these things, I would just like realize, oh wait, I just read 3 pages. Like, wait, I'm supposed to be just like get lost.
And what's ironic is Amir is Ciri's dad, and Geralt's acting like a dad here.
Yeah.
He's like,
yeah,
dude, this is disgusting. What the hell?
The most hideous incest imaginable in a gruesome nightmare. And you are in person. Such a good burn. So, just like Duny, or just like urchin meaning hedgehog in Old English, Emir means hedgehog in Nilfgaardian. Ha! How funny is that? So, he was born in, I guess, the early 1220s. There's not an exact dating on this, but we can sort of figure it out based on circumstantial and other dates.
Aziz, I just got such a like weird like moment of hearing you use a date that was not like Aegon's before Aegon's conquest or after Aegon's conquest. Like, which one?
1220 sounds like a real date. Right?
Yeah, right.
That's super far into the future. My God.
So he says he's the son. He's actually the son of Emperor Fergus, who is the son of Emperor Taurus. And Taurus is the one who reintroduced sun worship into Nilfgaardian society, which would be a good topic for another day. But he says he's the son of Aker Spark of Mecht, I don't know how to say that, which is another Nilfgaardian sort of territory that's been conquered. And right after he shows up as Duny, Mecht has been just conquered. So it's really chaotic there. So it's a good place to claim he's from because it's really hard for people to check. And
people are superstitious in Mecht.
yes. And so he is taken by the usurper, a name which apparently they struck his name from the records. The usurper tortured Emperor Fergus, and as part of the torture was turning Emhyr into Duny. And that still didn't break him, though. Fergus just was killed rather than saying, okay, you're the emperor now. He wanted to like legally take control, because that would be legal, torturing a man into signing a document. But he didn't sign, he didn't admit, and instead Emhyr is chased off into hiding. There's a few friends still loyal to him that help him stay hidden and keep him from being killed. And then this guy Zarthisius, who is the same one that appears in the main series to look for Ciri, the astromancer guy, and he tells Emhyr that, using his magic, that if you go beyond the Marnadal stairs, you'll be able to cure your curse. And that's where he does so and finds King Rogner in 1237, and that's Pavetta's, of course, born not long after that. And he starts seeing Pavetta circa 1251. And then Question of Price is 1252, and Ciri is born in 1253, or maybe late 1252, probably 1253 because the Beltane holiday is early in the year, and that's when she supposedly was born. And Duny does actually live in Cintra for quite a while, as Calanthe suggested. She said, you could just live here for a while, I'm going to be queen, etc. So this takes us to Vilgefortz. Vilgefortz, while Duny is living in Cintra. Actually, I should back up a little bit. They're living in Cintra, but they actually lived in Skellige most of the time, which we'll explain later, mostly because Duny was trying to keep on the down low about Mecht slowly becoming unchaotic and figuring out who he is. So now let's move on to Vilgefortz. So here's another quote.
All the evidence suggests information about blood leading us. All the conditions show this. Have you forgotten about the...
Michal, can you do that again? Sorry, you were...
Yeah, you went
about the elder blood leaked.
You were lagging out.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm good?
Yeah.
Now you're back, yeah.
Professional. All the evidence suggests that the information about the elder blood leaked to Nilfgaard was by us. All the conditions show this. Have you forgotten about Vilgefortz, ladies?
Sabrina responds, "No, I have not." Oh no, I have not. They're all very angry. A lot of people get angry at that comment. They're like, "We have not forgotten," because he, of course, betrays them at Thaned Isle, and so it's not too hard to piece together that he's the one that was behind all this because of his treason on other matters. So he had been tracking the Elder Blood for a long time, like a lot of the mages were. The Brotherhood of Sorcerers was tracking the Elder Blood, but they were doing it for supposedly and seemingly because they were concerned with the prophecy of Ithlin, which was the prophecy of the White Frost, of the coming climate change that would envelop all of the northern continents.
Which is why Emhyr calls himself the White Flame.
Right, it's so neat. Like, this is probably what inspired him. He believed this prophecy of Vilgefortz. So Vilgefortz, we find out, of course, has been, like y'all mentioned earlier, far worse than Stregobor. He's been experimenting on young girls for a long time. And here's a quote about that.
Thanks. I'm glad we got to read this. In that pit, the agent pointed to a hole that opened in the floor. There are bones, lots of bones. We have not had time to remove and examine them, but judging by the bones of the head, they are all young girls.
It was one of you, I think it was you, Michal, when we were talking about this offline, that said this is disturbing because even Dijkstra is like...
Yeah, deeply perturbed by this.
When he discovers the experimentation that's happening, he's like, whoa, this is bad.
Yeah. And it's all for Ciri's benefit. Like it's, it's all for this one reason. Like all these people are slaughtered and tortured for that.
We were talking about D&D alignments yesterday in our private chat. We're like, Dijkstra is like true neutral or neutral. And then we're like, okay, Vilgefortz is like chaotic evil and Emhyr is like neutral evil. So just to kind of on a spectrum, Vilgefortz is very bad, like Ramsay Bolton bad.
Yeah, definitely. So here is apparently something like this is what he reveals or convinces. Somehow he convinces Emhyr of all this. So there's two different quotes we have about this. Here's the first one, which is more directly from Ithlin's prophecy.
It was equally believed that she predicted the climate changes observed at the beginning and end of the 13th century, the White Frost, which popular superstitions always associated with the end of the world and the prophetic arrival of the destroyer.
So yeah, this is what Kyle you were starting to talk about. So he starts to see himself as maybe in opposition to that, the White Flame versus the White Frost, and of course Nilfgaard being sun worshippers, the idea of a White Frost. It seems like that would be even more difficult to like more problematic for a sun worshipping culture than, I mean, it's bad for anyone, but something like that sounds even worse when you're sun worshippers. So this inspires Duny, maybe not inspires, partly inspires, but enables him to reclaim his throne because Vilgefortz is like, well, I'll help you. And of course, Duny's no dummy. He's like, well, what do you want out of it? And well, here's another quote.
Vilgefortz lies to him.
Yeah, of course.
Vilgefortz, the extremely reliable, says.
Yeah, that's his name, right? Vilgefortz the reliable. Yeah.
The wizard bluntly admitted that he wished to achieve a high position, so he pulled out a scroll tied with snake skin and acquainted me with the contents. So I knew of the prophecy, I learned about the future fate of the world, and I realized what I must do. And I have come to believe that the end justifies the means. No, it doesn't. FYI. And that's also not what's really motivating you, you sick son of a bitch.
That's right.
It's so interesting because Vilgefortz twists the prophecy to make Emhyr, Duny, believe that it's about him, and then Emhyr then twists it to make introduces the White Flame into the prophecy, warping the whole Ithlinne prophecy of the White Frost. So it's just craziness.
And then he pretends like, oh no, he's like, oh no, Vilgefortz never fooled me. No, he didn't trick me. I was, Geralt's like, sure, yeah, okay.
A lot of that conversation is Emhyr being like, statement, Geralt,
sure you do. Yeah. Yeah, like that last line. And I have come to believe the end justifies the means. Geralt says, of course you do.
Well, look at how he tries to save face with all the fake Ciri stuff after, right? Like, he's like gets rid of all of his marshals.
It's so neat because he wants Ciri for both political and supernatural reasons. Fake Ciri accomplishes the political, so he's like, well, I don't want to just throw this part away because this is still useful to me, but I have not exactly given up on the other half of this either.
Which is so interesting. I mean, not to steal a line from our friends at the Not a Cast podcast, but when they talk about power as a shadow on the wall, and like fake Ciri's portrait is revealed, and they're all just like, "That's not Ciri." Yeah, and it's like, but who's gonna say anything? Nobody.
So this is where we get attached to the madness of the sea and the Maelstrom plot, Aziz.
Yeah, this is where the Sedna Abyss plot comes in because that's the plot between Emhyr and Vilgefortz was to sneak Ciri and Pavetta off into that ship and then have them teleport away, make it look like they went into the abyss. But of course, that doesn't happen the way they wanted because even though we don't know a lot about Pavetta, she was clever and attentive and observant. And that she undermines the plan, good for her. And she's still pretty young. It appears that she died around age 22. And as I mentioned briefly, she was spent a lot of her time on Skellige because they wanted to avoid the rumors of Duny not actually being, well, she didn't want to avoid the rumors, she didn't know. But Duny wanted to avoid the rumors of people finding out he wasn't really the son of Akerspark, and of course the hedgehog business is just, people were talking about that. He just didn't like that. She also made friends with Anna Henrietta, which is the Duchess of Toussaint. Maybe not Duchess, whatever. She's the leader of Toussaint. I forget what title she has. And that really helps because Anna is actually cousin to Emir, which makes her cousin to Ciri because, as for obvious reasons. So that really helped them when they went to Toussaint. This is part of why they had a friendly reception, not just Dandelion's, smoothness, but it was a family welcome, sort of. So some sort of weird argument happens on board the ship because Pavetta confronts Duny, or rather Duny maybe confronts Pavetta about the lack of Cirilla being there, and somehow it's so weird. Well, we have a quote though.
Yeah, so originally the mouse, that quote, you mean?
Yeah.
So the perception, this is his when Geralt asks what happened to Duny and Pavetta. They were sailing from Skellige to Cintra. They were surprised by a storm. Not a single splinter was found of the ship, Geralt. That the child was not with them is an incredibly queer matter. Inexplicable. They were meant to take it with them, but at the last moment did not. No one knows why. Pavetta could never be parted from ... And then Calanthe also asked about it. She notes, Pavetta and Duny destined for each other until the very end. How can one not believe in the power of destiny? And, so to me, it definitely feels like there is, not just destiny, but like a very strong agency on Pavetta's part to, like, she's such an unagented character. She is given so little information and made to do so much that whatever, many feelings. But I think my interpretation is that she at some point caught on to the fact that Duny was Emir and had nefarious plans for her daughter. And I think she definitely was behind leaving Ciri on dry land with Calanthe. But I don't know. I love to think about her in that moment, just like making maybe like the only major choice she's made in her life, other than like agreeing to marry Duny. And and then I'm sure Duny. I mean, to me, there's no question that Emir killed her. Well, I won't debate it because I just don't think. I don't think she fell over the side of the ship.
It's so weird. Like during an argument, like why an argument doesn't involve pushing and shoving if it's just an argument.
And at that point, like he wouldn't need her anymore, because like he knows Ciri is alive. And like his whole point is like he's going to run away with them, and Pavetta is the spare tire on this. That he doesn't need her anymore, and he was angry and he murders her. I mean, it's just that simple. And he's a terrible person.
That's why.
Yeah, Geralt's like, yeah, sure. He's like, he says some of the things that you said. He's like, no, you would have killed her. Like, it's obvious you would have killed her because she can expose your whole plan, and you would never leave a loose end like this. No, I would send her off to prison. We have places I could isolate her where no one would talk to her. He's like, nah. He's like, nah, bro, you wouldn't, because she wouldn't be truly isolated. Like there would be servants. There'd be.
She's also magic.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
That's why.
So like, what if she has it? Like, what if she like hooks up with a guard and has another child? Like, yeah, there's no way he's gonna exactly. But he still feels, even though he's the emperor, and it doesn't change anything if he tells the truth. He still just is like, nah, I didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, he also, Geralt is going to die in this scene. Like they're having this conversation because he's like, oh, you're about to die. I can tell you what's really going on here.
That's true.
Let me unburden my soul to you.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah. But I do love, like, a lot of the stories that I am drawn to kind of a lot of the time come down to an initial tragedy. A lot of the time involving parenthood, Harry Potter, Song of Ice and Fire, all these things. And this is very much this originating seed for The Witcher. And I it's so frustrating because like Pavetta gets so little screen time and so little, she barely speaks with her own voice, but she sets in motion some of the most incredible stuff in in the story.
Yeah,
so,
I agree. She's the hidden MVP.
Yeah, in Pavetta's name we stand.
That's why she didn't get another C name. She needed a name that would stand out because she's so special.
That's why I found it so odd because.
Well said. Yeah, that's good. So, Kyle, do you have any takes, or should we move on to the next bits?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say I found it really interesting that because the way the story is told, it's like, oh yeah, Vilgefortz had to stop me from going over the edge. We were already in the maelstrom. Yeah, he wanted to jump in and save Pavetta. I'm like, I mean, if we would have done that, it would still have complicated things because she would have already made her decision to. Like, there was already a confrontation, right? So, like, that's a really convenient answer, you know what I mean? And I don't know, I just found that kind of weird. Two really awful people kind of just being like, like Amir trying to save her and then Vilgefortz being like, no. I don't know. I found that kind of be
also, Vilgefortz is causing the storm. If he wanted her to not drown, he could have stopped the storm.
Yeah, he's like, oh, the storm, it started. Yeah, he's like, the way he explains it, it's like, this does not... I mean, yeah, I don't believe you.
It's interesting too because they describe Pavetta, the shy Pavetta, right? In that situation, they specifically say the shy Pavetta like made her move, right? I mean, like against two people with a lot of power, and this is so cool that she at least had agency in saving Ciri.
And she could have. I mean, she could have saved her own life probably by going along. Like I don't think Amir was like, I have to kill you. It's certainly convenient to still have that piece, but it's not necessary. Yeah. So I think she made a really incredible sacrificial choice, and just
That's true.
I wonder how she sensed the plot going down. Is it because of her intuition, just because of her intuition and her relationship with Duny, or was it magical? Like, I wish we knew more about that.
Yeah, you wonder about that because she may have been prophetic, or she may have said something in front of one of her servants, and then the servant told her what she said, and she's like, oh, because she would have had the ability potentially to have those prophetic moments like Ciri does. So yeah, that should be that has to have happened at some point, and maybe that's part of why Amir knew he had to get rid of her too, because she's just gonna, whether she wants to or not, she's just gonna speak truth in these moments where she turns into an oracle, and I don't think he wants that just happening. At random times, it's like, no, it's a loose. We can't have that happening.
It's so crazy how she had to grow up. She got pregnant at 14, and then had Ciri at 15, and then her whole life is gone. Like, that's so sad.
And they call her shy, but I mean, and it's probably true-ish, but she's more of mistaking her for being an introvert. I think she's just introverted. Which doesn't mean shy and introversion goes together somewhat, but it doesn't mean she's afraid. It doesn't mean she's not able to confront somebody. It just means that it's not her normal, day-to-day attitude. She doesn't like looking people in the eye. It's not that she's afraid of them.
It's like Calanthe is scissors and Pavetta is paper. This doesn't go together.
Like Pavetta likes to read. She's a bookworm. Like, that's one thing we find out, off page, is that she's just liked to be by herself. She didn't like having court servants around her. She liked to be by herself, that's an introvert. I mean, that's very straightforward. She liked books and being by herself, and yeah. So, yeah, we do like Pavetta. The more there's a lot we can infer about her, even though we would love more like concrete details. But yeah, like there is at least we can look at the shadows she casts and on different walls and put together a little bit here and there. So let's move on to the next little short part here, which is just how Amir gets the throne back. He gets his throne and continues to hunt for Ciri. There's a great little take here. Michal, you had a little bit of insight on this mage who turned him into a hedgehog, didn't you?
Yeah, so Amir is like, oh, well, it was the mage's little joke to turn me into a hedgehog because it sounds like hedgehog in Nilfgaardian. And then he's like, well, so when it was time for me to murder him, the sorcerer's name is Brathens, and apparently that sounds like the word for fried in in Nilfgaardian. And these sweet innocent boys were like, oh, he probably boiled him alive. I'm like, no, guys, there was oil involved. There might have been coating. I think this was a full-on fry-up.
It's funny how Amir's name is Hedgehog and this guy's name is Fried. It's like really weird. I don't know.
Can you imagine like Amir just being like, breath-ins, what does it sound like?
I'm gonna burn this guy because his name is Fried.
Good thing his name wasn't Milkshake.
Right. Oh God.
Or Spurge.
Just one comment from the chat. Macra says she was smarter than people gave her credit for. I agree with that. With the Pavetta.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yes, you're right. Not just the being the shy doesn't just make people think that she's not brave or that she's fearful. That they would mistake her intelligence as well. Yeah, that's a good point. So this, of course, is why Ciri is so important in the fall of Cintra. From the opening scene of Blood of Elves, Kovir is chasing Ciri because, although he doesn't even know everything, Emhyr didn't tell Kovir all of why Ciri was important. But it's the political and supernatural reasons are both important, and he's been after her for a long time. We find out that he gave a lock of hair to Fringilla when a 6-year-old lock of hair from Ciri as to use in divination or to use magical locating and all that. And of course, Fringilla is Nilfgaardian, so that makes sense, that connection. So you can see that basically, as the story unfolds, you find out that a whole lot of people have been looking for Ciri for a long time. It isn't just the Emperor. It isn't just Geralt. It isn't just Yennefer. It's a whole bunch of people have been tracking her for political and or supernatural reasons. But what's interesting about Emhyr is he's pretty much the only one who is interested in her for both. It seems like most of them either want her for political reasons or for the supernatural reasons, but he's the only one that wants both. Because even Vilgefortz doesn't care about the political stuff, except for maybe indirectly because he wants power from Emhyr. So unless y'all have something to add to that, we can move on to this section of ambition, which is why all the various people want Ciri.
I just thought it was funny when the huge battle, when everybody's battling and Kovir and everyone's looking for her, she just like pieces out, and then she like leaves everyone hanging out to dry, and then they're looking for Ciri again. Everybody is on the hunt for Ciri again, and then of course Geralt hires some detectives, and the hunt for Ciri is on again. So I just think it's funny how Ciri is like peace, and she just pieces out from the battle.
So here is that's good. Here is the first quote about Emhyr and his ambition.
There is no question, said Philippa, that Emhyr has hunted Cyrilla for a long time. Everyone thought that it was for a political marriage with Cintra and the seizure of a fief, which is the legal legacy of the girl. But we cannot exclude the possibility that this was not about politics, but the elder blood gene, which Emhyr wants to introduce into the imperial line. If Emhyr knows that we want to fulfill the prophecy, he may wish for the future queen of the world to be born in Nilfgaard.
Of course, what he tells us is that it's the queen of the world, and then he wants to have the son through her. But whatever. It's basically the same point. It's just slightly different. So
nobody agrees.
Yeah, nobody agrees.
Yeah.
This is his version of it. Actually, we have this quoted too. So let's just do that.
Yeah. Cyrilla will go to Nilfgaard. She will become empress at a suitable moment. She will be happy, like most of the queens I was talking about. It will come with time. Cyrilla will transfer the love that I do not demand at all onto the son I will beget with her, an archduke and later an emperor who will beget a son who will be the ruler of the world and will save the world from destruction. Thus speaks the prophecy whose exact contents only I know.
Only I know?
Yeah, convenient again.
How does only he know it? Like, why would he be the only one that knows it?
Well, because he killed everyone else.
And by the way, when Michal was reading that, since I'm a Witcher 3 fan, Charles Dance he voices Emhyr. So I was like, just getting Charles Dance vibes in my head.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, Emhyr and Tywin as a comparison we're definitely going to have to talk about.
Yeah.
Good point. Yes, very good point. Yeah, and it's because of lines like this next line here.
The end justifies the means. Emir said dully. What I'm doing for posterity, to save the world. If the world is to be saved like that, the Witcher lifted his head, it would be better for it to perish. Believe me, Duny, it would be better if it perished.
Mm-hmm.
Is it
one of my favorite lines.
Is it better to kill 20 men at dinner? Yeah. More?
Right on, exactly. And just like that line, that it's presented dishonestly in the first place. It's like, yeah, but that's not really what you did.
Yeah.
You did kill pretty much 10,000 men at dinner.
You can see how the prophecy has gotten into his ego, right? His ego starts to swell, and it starts to become this self-fulfilling thing, right? With him, it's just. Really,
he had a pretty big ego to start. I mean, he's the son of an emperor and all that. Like, of course. Yeah. That comes with the territory, I suppose.
I mean, I think a lot of this does come down to like all these different people are like, we have to save the world. I'm like, use Ciri to do that, but it's not actually about Ciri again. And like, I think the ultimate key is like, no, Ciri is the one who saves the world. Like you're all reading this prophecy wrong. Every single one of you, and including the witches and including, Emir and Vilgefortz and all these people. And because they just can't see that it's just Ciri.
Yeah, they think for some of it's chauvinism, I assume, that they think it has to be a boy. But even though, which is a little odd, because the elder blood only activates in women. That's very clear from the bloodline chat that they have in Baptism of Fire, that men can carry it, but it can only be, it can't activate in them. They can only like pass the gene on. So it's even a little, when you really break it down like that, it's odd that they would expect a man to be the one, because it can't manifest like that. So anyway,
this prophecy is very Ragnarok-esque in that in the end, after the destruction of the world, someone takes over and kind of seeds the world, and that's what they believe Ciri is going to do. You kind of get this Adam and Eve vibe at the end of Ragnarok. This is kind of this like similar thing where there's like death and then rebirth, how we see in the hero's journey. So I find that really interesting, this Ragnarok-esque thing. And people truly do believe that this prophecy is going to happen, right? Like, that people truly do believe that the end of the world is coming.
Yeah, a lot of people do, especially, and people who matter, especially, like the sorcerers, a lot of them believe it. And, the sorcerers obviously have huge amounts of influence. So when they believe things, they tend to get other people to believe them. And
but again, a lot of this belief is self-serving, right? Like it's really convenient that like Vilgefortz believes in a prophecy that's going to make him like the most powerful mage ever. Emir believes in a prophecy that's going to let him fuck his daughter and like be the progenitor of the king of the world and kill whoever he wants or whatever. It is. I don't think, and we'll go more into this. When we're looking at it more closely, but I don't think that it has to be disingenuous. Consciously to be disingenuous.
That's true. Yeah. There's so much power involved in all this, so much ambition wrapped up into it, that there isn't a lot of room for self-reflection. And these aren't the types of people that are known for that sort of self-reflection. They don't really question whether they're being good or not. That's not really in there. Vilgefortz doesn't care about that.
And just to make this equal opportunity, like the Witches' Lodge does the same thing. Like they, it's not quite as horrific what they're suggesting to Ciri, but it still is ultimately like, you're going to go and be a princess and be our puppet and have the babies we want you to have. And it's a little bit nicer, but it's, and they're promising her power in return. But like, at the end of the day, nobody it's very much like, she saw snow and was wondering why in terms of Melisandre. And it's like, we saw Ciri and we're like, okay, but who's the prophecy really about? And the prophecy is like, Ciri, it's about Ciri.
It's about Ciri.
Well, look at what happens at the Thanet coup when Vilgefortz finds out about the fake Ciri. He betrays Emir like right away. He's like, he's like, he's like that. This guy served my purpose. I'm gonna get mine now. I'm gonna use Ciri for what I want to get power. And he's like, he sees this as a time to make his move, and things just get way more complicated, and everything starts hitting the fan. A maelstrom happens on land.
Landstrom.
Landstrom.
So there's of course other people involved, mostly who similarly want. They're sort of like Vilgefortz in that they have there's no world saving involved in their plans, really. It's mostly just about how this can be powerful for them. In fact, the elder folk, who are, Alberon and Eredin and the Wild Hunt folk, they're very much the opposite. They don't care about saving worlds. They, in fact, would prefer to be destroying worlds, or at least stealing people from them, because they're real bad. But they believe this Sparrow Reborn, kind of, which would be Ciri, can help them regain these gates of the world, the Arg Gaith, that they lost control of thanks to the unicorns. Yay, go unicorns! The good people, the good species of the universe. So.
I do love that part of this story is like, it's all politics and incest and death and all this stuff, and then it's like elves versus unicorns.
And there's politics between elves and unicorns. Like, what, really?
Just a bit off topic for a second. The Witcher 3 really expands on the Wild Hunt. It's called The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt, and you see this the White Frost, the Ragnarok stuff happen, and it's really cool. Like, that's why I kind of wish there was more of the Wild Hunt in the books. You know what I mean? Like, I wish they expanded more on that, because there is this cool Norse mythology element to that, kind of mixed in with the elven stuff. So for those of you who have played The Witcher 3, maybe I'll do my own separate little Witcher 3 spoiler cast for you on kind of some of the lore and stuff. But it is really cool to see that CD Projekt Red expanded on that, kind of a little bit off topic with Sapkowski's, how stuff ended with Lady of the Lake and Season of Storms.
Yeah.
The lore books they must have are.
Oh.
Yeah.
well, the whole Witcher 3 plotline is Amir trying to make Ciri emperor, and then we see the Wild Hunt are trying to acquire Ciri, and they're trying to get her power to basically destroy the world, like Aziz says.
Yeah. So that is mostly, I think that's the whole, we mentioned why the sorcerers care, we mentioned the elder folk, we mentioned Vilgefortz, and we mentioned Emir. Everybody else who was after Ciri, unless I forgot someone, was political reasons, like Foltest. He wanted to marry her, or was pretending to have one her, who's kind of pretending that, I'll just take care of her. But that, we could set that aside for another day. The political stuff we can save. But does anyone else, do you have anything else to add, y'all, to this part?
I'm just still impressed by how deep this goes.
Right? It's so cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about
would you guys call this the main plot? I would say so, right? I mean,
that's a main plot, maybe perhaps the most main plot, perhaps of all. Yeah, could be.
Because towards the end, Ciri becomes more of a main character than Geralt, right?
Yeah, I think so. So let's see here. What we have is a section that I called Bad Blood and Loose Ends, which is the rest of the characters plus a few other bits that were in A Question of Price. There's still a little more about Emir, because it's interesting to see how his orders throughout the books interplay with the fact that we know who he is now. Like, the first time you read through, you don't know that when he's referring to the Witcher, when he sends orders out of referring to Geralt and dealing with him and what to do about him, it comes from a place of having met him personally, which really changes it, especially with quotes like this. It reads so much differently after you have had the reveal.
Reince is to stop pussyfooting around and to stop playing with the Witcher, else it could end. No one toys with the Witcher. I know him, Cohorn. He is too clever to lead Reince to the trail. I repeat, Reince is to organize the assassination immediately, to take the Witcher out of the game at once. He's to kill him and then disappear, bide his time and await my orders.
That's not a very nice thing to do to a guy who saved your life.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's again like it's yay, Geralt saved Duny's life in the first time you read the story, and then it's like, just let the fucker die.
but
darn it,
Ciri gets the last laugh on that one.
Yeah,
sure does. That's true. So you wonder if Geralt is or if Emir was mad about the Child of Surprise part, the whole like, okay, I'm going to claim her, and he's like, wait, no, that was going to be. At the time, Duny didn't know that he was, who Cirillo or who Pavetta was, because Vilgefortz hadn't approached her. He just knew that she was a princess, and so the political power part was a big deal. He didn't know about the Elder Blood stuff, but still, he couldn't have been happy with Geralt stealing his kid, basically. So that, that, because he did impregnate Pavetta, so he, might be possessive about his child there. He's, so, a guy like this, you could see him being petty about that. And arguably, it's not even petty that, as big of a scumbag as he is, well, I think, the child surprise thing is still kind of like.
You could look at it that way, or you could look at it in like the destiny way, and that like Emir presumably believes in destiny, right? And what Geralt's doing is at the height of his triumph, invoking another form of destiny that is eventually going to unravel all of the destiny that Emir has been working toward.
Well, so you know what I find really interesting? Like you mentioned this, Aziz, like Emir did this because he wanted to get rid of the curse, right? Like at first that's what it was. What if Vilgefortz never came around and spewed that prophecy to Duny? I wonder if things would have turned out differently. You know what I mean? Because Vilgefortz, like, then Emir's like, oh, okay, like I really, like his views start to change just a little bit after that, don't you think? I don't know. I've always wondered what happened if Vilgefortz wouldn't approach Emir.
Well, yeah, Vilgefortz's power, his magic, his offer included, seemed vital in terms of Emir didn't think he could get his throne back until Vilgefortz's offer. So it does seem like his magic, his ability to make moves, his network of spies and things like that was important for the reclaiming of the throne, although Emir will surely, and does, discount Vilgefortz's help. It seems like it was actually pretty vital.
That's why I wonder if Vilgefortz and the sorcerers, if they actually knew more beforehand than we thought. That's kind of just the vibe I'm getting, because I was like, wow, this is like such a big deal and such a big turning point for Emir. It's like, what if they, like, did they know extra information, like some sort of like, did they see forward? I don't know. That's kind of just something that I've always wondered.
Right on. Yeah, good point. So where are they now? Let's do a little where are they now-ness. Unfortunately, we don't know what happened to Kud Kudak. He may have just passed by the time the main event started, because, that was quite a bit of time has passed since Question of Price before the main series starts. Mousak, ditto. He's in the games, though, right? Mousak is still in the video game, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's under the name of another character. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So basically, and the TV show has him die in the Fall of Cintra, which would kind of it's kind of a safe assumption for book canon that he dies in the Fall of Cintra, but maybe not. I don't know. He may have left he may have just left Cintra earlier, because he stayed with Pavetta. The reason he stayed in the first place was because of Pavetta. So when Pavetta dies, he may have just left then. But who knows? So for all we know, Mousak is still alive somewhere out there. He's just chilling in some trees somewhere. He is a druid after all. So Iced is killed in 263 by an arrow to the eye at the Battle of Marnadal. And as we know, Calanthe commits suicide not very long after. She gets back to the city, and then the city is overwhelmed, and she asks her guards to kill her, and they're all afraid of her, so they still don't do it. So she's like, fine, I'll do it myself, which is very, very much in line with Calanthe.
Very Calanthe, yeah.
Like, I'll do it myself. That's very, like, that's her, that's like her motto. That's her house words. Calanthe,
yeah.
Do it myself.
If it bordered on the impossible.
That's so good. So because of her death, because of Ice's death, and all these other characters, Visigurd basically becomes the de facto leader of the armies, because all the other military leaders are dead. And he organizes resistance. Early in the books, there's a guerrilla army led by him. But then things start to fall apart because of the whole fake Cirilla thing. They are like resistance fighters, Cintran resistance independence fighters. And they hear that Ciri is voluntarily marrying the emperor. And they're like, well, that sucks. They thought she would fight with them and be a holdout. Of course, she is doing that because that's not the real Cirilla. But they don't know that. So this starts to really undermine the morale of the Cintran resistance army. And it really takes Visigurd's hatred of the Cintran women to another level. And as we see, relate this to what we just supposed about Emhyr and being angry with Geralt for the Child of Surprise thing. Well, there were other people upset with Geralt for quote unquote stealing away the heir to the throne of Cintra as they saw it. So lots of other nobles don't look kindly on a dude coming by to like take their princess. So here's a big quote. Kyle, you could do the you get to play the role of Daniel Echeverry here with the underlined parts, and Michal, you get to be Visigurd.
Okay. Of course, Geralt, who was called the White Wolf, the same rogue who laid claim to the Bright of Cirilla, Pavetta's daughter, granddaughter of Calanthe, the same Ciri of whom there is so much talk now. You were too young to remember those times when the scandal was all that was talked about at the courts, but I was an eyewitness to those events.
And what binds him to Princess Cirilla?
That dog, the Marshal pointed at Geralt, contributed to the marriage of Pavetta, daughter of Queen Calanthe, to Duny, an unknown stranger from the south. From this shameful union was born Cirilla. Even before her birth, she was promised to that bastard Witcher as payment for his help in conducting the marriage. Have you heard of the Law of Surprise?
Not at all, but keep talking, Marshal.
The Witcher, Visigurd again pointed his finger at Geralt, after the death of Pavetta, wanted to take the girl, but Calanthe wouldn't allow it and threw him out. But he waited for the right time. When the war started with Nilfgaard and Cintra, he took advantage of the confusion and turmoil and kidnapped Ciri. He kept the girl hidden because he knew that we were seeking her, and eventually he grew bored of her and sold her to Emir. So none of that is true.
Yeah. And if it was just a private opinion of a random citizen, no big deal. But Visigurd is surely telling this story to his soldiers that he's leading, and if not spreading it far and wide to other people too. So that's a lot of ears listening to that take. So it's a pretty big deal. So that's not exactly good for Geralt to have that out there, or just in general, it's just not good because it's like you said, it's not true. And it puts blame where it doesn't belong. Because obviously, if Visigurd knew the rest of the story, I think he'd probably be more mad with Duny and obviously like Vilgefortz he would still probably not like Geralt, but he would no longer put Geralt at the top of the list, I think. But isn't it really easy to see how like this opinion, like this isn't over the top, but it's not crazy for someone to think this if you don't know the characters or the people, the personalities involved. So you could see how this would spread or be believable.
Well, they were already spreading propaganda at quite a high rate, right? Like That's
true.
They were just taking over.
And there's just, in general, the fall of Cintra, there's just a lot of people who are mad and they lost their homes, they're refugees. There's going to be blame going all the way around. We try to avoid too much TV talk, but we saw that in the TV. People, like in the refugee camps, people were cursing Calanthe's leadership because they're looking for someone to blame, and because they're mad and they're living out in the woods and stuff, and of course, like you said, Kyle, some of it's just agenda based. They're taking advantage of the chaos to spread their agenda or to spread lies that help their purposes for later. Isn't it interesting that this Count Echeverry hasn't heard of the Law of Surprise? I thought that was kind of a neat little tidbit. This is, by the way, this Count Echeverry is the guy who's related to Ciri. He's like super distantly related to Ciri. They both have Muriel in their the girl who had an affair with Amavet, the boy of the Hautberg triplets. That's
it goes to show the different cultures care about things differently, right? We see obviously the Skelligans, we see them go, oh, whoa, the Law of Surprise and Destiny, we can't fuck around with this stuff. And then people like Echeverry who, it's not really might be not ingrained in their history books as something that's important, something that's relevant. It might just be some like sort of, that's for the Druids and the Skelligans and those people, So.
And that's a great point too, Kyle, because Emir builds a cenotaph for Calanthe in Cintra to kind of honor her. It's a political move. The Nilfgaardians weren't too happy with it, but it did help. The Cintran population did like it. But there's a second cenotaph for her on Skellige because she was unequivocally popular there. And so there was a lot less controversy over her death there. They're just like, we liked her. The sea went mad when she died, and we're going to honor her. So like that's a great point.
Some of his smarter political moves, the fake Ciri stuff, really started to screw with. People started to dissent after that, right? Like things started to get more shady, and people started to turn on him, right? Once they started to figure out that plot.
So after all that nonsense, Visigurd does say something true and very interesting. I don't think he has. I don't know how right he knew he was. He was very close to nailing it.
Then in Cintra, 15 years ago, you talked a lot about destiny. I thought then it was nonsense, but it was your destiny, Witcher. Since that night, your fate was sealed, inscribed in black runes among the stars. Ciri, Pavetta's daughter, is your destiny, and your death. For Cirilla, Pavetta's daughter, you'll hang.
Well,
nice guy.
He didn't hang, but he's not entirely wrong. He did. He was willing to give his life for Cirilla, and I love that one. Inscribed in black runes among the stars. What a cool way to describe destiny.
The Visigurd the Prophet? Is that what we're calling him now?
So for all his bluster, Visigurd and talk of loyalty and all this, he will end up leading his men on the side of Nilfgaard because, well, Cirilla marries. Not really Cirilla, but he has no reason to doubt it. Cirilla marries the Emperor, and they're like, okay, well, we're part of Nilfgaard now, so I'm a Nilfgaardian. So, oh well. And by the way, in Blood of Elves, Queen Miv, who is so really cool, under the low-key awesome, she's like, that's going to happen. She predicts it. She's like, yeah, they're eventually going to just end up fighting for Nilfgaard. So it's like, whoa, that was true.
Queen of Valyria. I love her character.
Yeah, she's really cool. She's still a member, of course. She's what is it? It's the third book that ends with her making him a knight of Valyria, right? What a great ending for that book. It's so good. Yeah,
I love that. It's one of my favorite moments. And Geralt's like, what?
He can't help but smile. Yeah, it's written so well. Another peculiarity of medieval / Gothic / monarchical style marriages is that sometimes something like this happens. Windhelm was a suitor. Windhelm of Atre was a suitor for Pavetta, right, when he was 12. And Rainfarn was his escort. Rainfarn was like 27, so like an elder statesman. He's the one who almost stabbed him, or did stab him here. So we don't know what happens to Rainfarn, but Windhelm, 7 years later, Calanthe betroths Ciri to Windhelm. So he's like second chance at marrying into this dynasty. But then 4 years later, Calanthe breaks the betrothal. And even now, I'm not sure why, but she's like, nah. It probably political reasons, maybe just because she realized she had to have Skellige, because Atre is already like a traditional vassal of Cintra, so maybe she just the situation changed. But then, of course, the war breaks out, etc. In 1267, which would be 4 years after Ice's death and Calanthe's death, Windhelm leads a rebellion, and it lasts about a year. And the Skelligans get involved, and here is the quote. Kyle, you do the underlined part, please.
The rebellion in the province has been quelled. We have broken up the rebels. Only a few managed to escape to Verdun, and we've caught their leader, Duke Windhelm of Atre.
Good, said the man after a while, still not raising his head from his hands. Windhelm of Atre. Order him to be beheaded. No, not beheaded. Executed in some other way. Spectacularly, lengthily, and cruelly. And publicly, it goes without saying. A terrifying example is necessary, something that will frighten others. Only please, Cohorn, spare me the details. You don't have to bother with a vivid description in your report. I take no pleasure from it. Liar.
Yeah, I think I was like, actually, send me the report.
Yeah.
So
I'll be there myself.
Is any of that vindictive from a question of price era, or is it pure politics, or is it maybe a little of both?
I think the fact that he repeats his name suggests that there is at least some of the history that is influencing in the ear here.
His pride is wounded, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, if he was also betrothed to Ciri, like, I mean, Emir does not want anyone in the way of what he is doing, even if they are no longer in the way. I think
Well said. Well said. So, Crack and Crate with is Jarl of Skellige with Iced when Iced becomes king of Cintra, and then when Iced dies, Crack is still in charge of the armed forces. So what I wrote here is he seems to have changed a lot after year. Maybe the fist shaking by Iced finally did its work over time. Like, you know what? I'm going to start listening to all that fist shaking. So he swore a blood oath when Iced and Calanthe died. He was like, I will get my revenge. And before the war, though, Ciri learns to skate with Hjalmar. That's Croc and Crate's son, and they get fake engaged, kind of like it's almost like a little Pavetta Duny thing without the backstory, without the creepy extra stuff. Hjalmar, it's all very Hjalmar is just a regular kid who's like having her has a crush on a girl near his age, so that's all fine. But of course that gets they get split up because that marriage is not sanctioned or anything. Crack has that brief relationship with Yennefer, and we quoted them earlier, and he helps her rescue Ciri. So he does a lot of important things, and he joins into Windhelm's rebellion. And then when the rebellion is put down, the Skelligans are like, well, we don't have to stop. We can keep going. We're still the power at sea. We're still not afraid of Nilfgaard. And you get this line from King Henselt.
Jarl Crach and Crate, if you remember, didn't sign a truce with Nilfgaard and regularly bites them, attacking and setting fire to their maritime settlements and forts in the provinces. The Nilfgaardians have nicknamed him Tirthis Muir, Sea Boar. They frighten children with him.
Yeah, so Crack really becomes something, doesn't he? What a character.
In The Witcher 3, there's this huge plot line in Skellige, and it's my favorite plot line in the whole story.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Oh, hell yeah. I love Crack on Crate. That's why
he survives, right? He's like, he goes on, yeah?
And that's why I'm called Crack on Kyle today.
Not Kyle on Crack.
Yeah. I actually asked Aziz and Michal about that. I'm like, how do I do this? And they're like, Crack on Kyle. I'm like, yeah.
That's a good one. So, one other thing about that. So just to follow up on Visigurd, we don't actually know what happens to him. I assume he just like becomes part of the Nilfgaardian army. He gets an officer's position there because he's an existing leader. But for all we know, he dies in one of the battles, like Brenna or something like that. But Crack and Crate for sure survives. And that's it. That's the only other character that we have from the original story. We don't know what happens to like Haxo, or that's probably the only one I didn't mention. Yeah, I think that ties up our loose ends. So Kyle, do we want to talk a little about the TV scenes and then our funny stuff?
Yeah. So one thing that's super interesting, if you go back and watch the episode, I believe it's episode 4. What's it called? Bastards, Burials, and Banquets, I believe it's called. One thing that I found very interesting in the show version of the story was there was visual cues and foreshadowing that Ciri's mom, Pavetta, and Duny were both connected to magic. And I was rewatching the series for the second time, and I noticed where Queen Calanthe is taking in the suitors. So, you have the Nilfgaardian suitors and everybody that's going up to Calanthe, and then Calanthe's obviously making fun of Nilfgaard and all of this kind of stuff. And then after Pavetta has her big moment with magic, that where she has the suitors and where she marries Pavetta and Duny, there's actually there's the conjunction of spheres. There's a visual spoiler of the conjunction of spheres. And I found that to be really interesting because the conjunction of spheres is obviously connected to the whole prophecy of the White Frost, and that's connected to Ciri and her elder blood and all of that. So, I just wanted to do a quick little screen cap. I'm not sure if everybody has saw this, but I'm gonna try to do this correctly. I don't know if I will, but we'll try. And something that I found, and I showed Aziz and Michal, and they found it really interesting as well. So
yeah, that's a good catch.
Application window. No, I don't want to do that. Which one is it? I'm really bad at this. Okay, so don't want to do that. Can you guys see it right now, or am I showing our outline?
We're on delay, so just a second.
Oh, I screwed up.
I see the outline.
No.
One second, everyone. I'm going to try to fix this. Application with Chrome tab. There we go. All right, so we're here. So I got a couple of screenshots. You can see Jaskier in the show. He's playing his lute and whatnot. But look, if we look closely, you can see the conjunction of spheres. And that's pretty cool. You can see it's a really nice shot, by the way. If you're looking closely, all the costumes are amazing.
Yeah, good call.
And then we obviously have the moment with Duny, Pavetta, Geralt, and all of that. You can see they're in the middle. If you look at, there's like the snakes connecting them. Jormungandr in chat, it's very much like it's Ragnarok-esque Jormungandr. Yeah, the connecting in the Ragnarok as well, that symbolism. And then here it is again, and they're being married there, and they're in the center. And this is all tied to destiny and whatnot, right? So yeah. I thought that was really interesting, and I hope, that's one thing that is different from the books and the show that I found really interesting. There isn't a whole lot of the conjunction of spheres talk, and I think they're going to focus a lot more on that in the show. And they're going to kind of just tell us a little bit more about the conjunction of spheres and the lore, and I think there's going to be more visual cues. So be on the lookout. Season 2 is a long time from now.
Literally on the lookout.
But just to let everyone know, I am going to go do a series when I rewatch the episodes and go deeply more into the symbolism and kind of try to find some of these Easter eggs. I'm going to be re-reviewing every episode, so that is something that hopefully you'll all enjoy. And then I go back.
That's a great catch, Kyle, because too, like the idea of conjunction of the spheres as an idea or a reference to marriage that's a pretty cool symbolic connection there. That's neat, especially because rings are a part of marriage, and a ring isn't a sphere, but it is, it's called a sphere represented two-dimensionally looks like a ring, like on the ground like that.
Well, think about the snake eating its own tail. We got the cycle of the hero's journey, right? You got life, or you got birth, life, death, and rebirth. So you got that whole cycle, right? And that's, you see how many different spheres there are. There's 3 spheres, right? There's the snakes, and there's 2 different worlds, and then there's the middle world connecting to the 2 different worlds. Elder blood, elven blood, all of that. So there's lots of symbolism there that I found really interesting. That's tied to Norse mythology and also some of the lore within the series.
Cool. I'm really wondering how they're gonna do the Lara Jean stuff, the Lara Dorn Jean. Are they going to do it that way, or are they going to approach it differently? I'm curious about that. I know, Michal, one of the characters you were really wondering about the TV show's version of was Kovir, and I wonder, we touched on him briefly today and his mission, and I wonder how, what he knows, if the show version is going to change, and if they're going to do the whole he's going to fall for her a little bit, or if they're not going to do that on the show because of the age thing, or I don't know. A lot of questions there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kovir is a zealot in the show.
Yeah,
so, yeah, I don't know. It's again, I'm watching very carefully. We'll see.
Maybe he'll just become less, something will change his attitude.
I have to assume they're going for a Jaime Lannister type of thing. And ramped him up on this end of the story so they can heighten the change at the end, but
It's interesting because both him and Fringilla have changes of heart in a way, right? They both are super conflicted about all the things that are going on, and they know that serving Nilfgaard and that they've committed atrocities, and war. We know that war changes people. Killing people changes people at a human level. It's I never killed anyone, so I wouldn't know. But we got to wonder how much that affects them, right? All of these terrible things that are happening in the world, they're a big part of that. And it's going to be really interesting to see because they did give Fringilla more of a role in the show too. They gave her some extra parts too, so that's going to be really
changed her personality quite a bit too, but not necessarily for bad. Just changed her, and that'll be interesting, perhaps. One thing I want to give Sapkowski a shout out for here too is that it's not typical in fiction for they change their mind to be a major reason for plots to move in a certain way. But he does that several times for really key moments. Like, and that, I think that's great because that's realistic. People do change their minds when you know, it all comes to a head and you realize like what you've been planning to do, and you're actually about to take the leap and do this thing that you've been thinking about doing. And you have, that's when you're confronted with what the outcome might be most of all, and that might cause you to back down. I mean, yeah, it's a recurring theme in some of these most important moments in the stories that like people just decide, actually, I don't want to go through with this after all. It's not always just that simple, but I think that, you know, that's a little bit brave as a narrative choice.
Well, you know what's really interesting too? Sapkowski inverts fairy tales. He does a lot of reverse heroes journeys, right? Like like if you're a hero, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. If you're the villain, you live long enough to see yourself become the hero, or at least die trying. That kind of narrative, and I that's why I'm so excited about the show, because I think that it will really highlight like that different part of the story. Visually, we can see the actors and actresses, the emotion on their faces as opposed to just reading it. And I think that that's why it's so cool that we also have a show to compare with the books now.
Right on.
So yeah, are we at the end nearly? We got our funny moments.
Let's do our funny moments and then be done. Yeah. Okay, so opening quote that I think is awesome because it has some alliteration and describes the confusion of all those bloodlines from earlier.
Yeah. Bloody hell, Yennefer hissed through her teeth. I'm lost, said Sabrina Glevisig, in the jungle of all this genetic genealogy.
What a great line. Jungle of all this genetic genealogy.
That was my favorite because it's such a tongue twister. When I read that, I was like, it kind of took me back a little bit.
I think he chose Sabrina and made sure he said her whole name, because Glefessig doesn't have a pair of G's in there. Glefessig in this jungle of all this genetic genealogy. I wonder how that reads in Polish though, because like I was wondering about the wordplay. Like, was the wordplay that smooth, and like did it just work out in English? Like, I mean, because I don't know if he could have planned it that way.
We have some irony, Aziz.
We do, yeah. So. We have this other quote that we almost used this as the opening quote, but at the last minute we went with the Triss Marigold coming back to the throne room because it's such a great way to circle through. But this is such a good line. Kyle, why don't you read the bottom part, and Michal, you read the main part.
Besides, even as Urkian, you were quite pleasant, but you can't count on having the throne just yet. I intend to rule a little longer beside the new king of Cintra. The noble Ace Tirsach of Skellig has made me a very interesting proposition.
You don't want the throne of Cintra, you want the princess.
So Geralt's more right than he knows there, because, I mean, I'm sure if it weren't for Vilgefort's later coming to Duny and showing him this prophecy, he might have just wanted the throne of Cintra as a way to help himself get back his empire. But in fact, he does want the princess. He just didn't necessarily realize all the reasons why at the first point. So that's pretty good. It's a tongue in cheek there. On reread, that line really jumps out. Duny claims to be the son of Akerspark, which, as we talked about, but the actual descendants of Akerspark. This is so funny, right? We have Orm, Gorm, Torm, Horm, and Gonzalez for the male children, and then if the girls are
go home, Sapkowski, you're drunk.
Yes, go home,
Gonzalez, where the hell did that come from?
Alia, Valia, Nina, Paulina, Malvina, and Argentina.
Such a troll, man! I swear to God.
Speaking of weird translations from the extra genealogy table, this came out. Why don't you just read this one, Michal, because it's okay. I don't know what word this is supposed to be, but it just came out great.
It is known that Ace Tirsach proposed to the queen several times, but always got a basket.
What?
Does that mean like dumped? Like
a basket? I gotta know what that. It's too bad. Macrophage isn't on the chat anymore.
It's like an edible arrangement.
Really help us. That's a Google Translate thing.
Like, so. I'm wondering if it's a basket of fruit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I won't marry you, but here's a basket of fruit. That's your consolation prize.
And we're going to have a quote to start the outro.
Yeah.
So this is where it all began, thought Dykstra, looking around the large hall. The famous engagement feast, during which appeared an iron hedgehog demanding Princess Pavetta's hand, and Queen Calanthe hired a witcher. How amazing are the interwoven fates of humans, thought the spy, surprised by the banality of his own thoughts.
That's, of course, like one paragraph before or after Triss's thoughts on the throne room. So I thought that would be cool to have one at the beginning and one at the end. I don't think that one requires much breakdown. It's just a great quote. It sums it up nicely.
So that's going to do it for today for episode 5 of the podcast of Surprise. We are super excited that y'all are asking for more episodes from us. You know, all of you have been asking for extra episodes, and it was cool that we were able to align our schedules to do one in between our next one. Our next one is July 10th, and we'll be covering The Edge of the World. Super excited to do that one. We get to do explore a little bit more with Torque. We didn't get a whole lot of him in the show. One of my favorite side characters in the short stories. So
and there's a lot of characters that we can do, like Where Are They Nows in that one too. Not nearly as many, but you know, Teruvial, for example, she makes it through the whole story and etc.
Yeah, well, one thing that's really cool too is we get to learn a lot more about the Elven plotline. There's a deeper knowledge that we get to explore. So.
I'm looking forward.
Yeah, so a big reason this episode happened was all of the awesome people on our Podcast of Surprise Facebook group. You can find the link to that in the description of the video. Of course, we invite all the people who are watching this now or later on to come to our Facebook group and come chat with us. We do all sorts of little threads and extra stuff, and we do kind of some spoiler talks and some other threads and stuff like that. So we want to thank everybody that's part of our Facebook group. You can follow the Podcast of Surprise on Twitter in the description of the video. It says Pod of Surprise if you want to go find us on Twitter. And Michal, what's next for you?
So I'm keeping up with the Vassals of Kingsgrave. We're, I'm on Twitter. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is back, so my Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast, Level 7 Access, is doing weekly updates. It's lots of nerdy stuff.
You can find the link
to that's cool.
YouTube in the description, and also Michal's Twitter and all of that in the description if you want to go check her out. And Aziz.
Well, I have, as usual, every Friday I'm playing Crusader Kings for Game of Thrones, and so that's still ongoing. We're starting a new campaign today, House Gardener, and tomorrow I am participating in the Intelligent Speech Conference. This is the last day to buy tickets for that. They're only $15, but there's like 40 different podcasters doing presentations at this virtual convention, and I'm doing one of them, and it's only tangentially Game of Thrones related, so it's a different kind of presentation from me. And of course, we're doing Valar Veritas over on History of Westeros channel. That's we're on the week 5 of A Feast for Crows out of 12, having lots of fun with that. And of course, I'm on my free time, I'm learning lots more about The Witcher.
Doing math.
Doing math, yeah, bloodlines and elf calculations.
For me, everyone, I'm also doing a game stream tonight, not to compete with Aziz or anything, but I'm playing The Last of Us 2. I believe it's part 7 on the PS4, so that'll be fun. Tomorrow, I'm dedicating a stream to Maura Lee, playing some Final Fantasy, and then I'm going to be doing some reactions on Sunday. And then some Witcher news videos, some Season 2 stuff next week. Got some production stuff, so be on the lookout for that. Of course, if you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel, and also subscribe to my awesome co-host channels as well. You can find all their information in the description of this video. For the podcast version, like we said, we have 4 episodes already up on Anchor. You can find, I put the links to every single podcast listening forum you can find in that in the description of the video. Of course, if you're enjoying it and you want to support the podcast, you can hit that support button by pledging $1, $5, or $10 a month, or you can leave a review or rate the podcast. That really helps out as well. That's kind of like subscribing or leaving a like on a video on YouTube. So that's kind of the podcast form version of that. And like I said, June 10th, June 10th, we've already passed. July 10th is the next version of the podcast. We will be covering the edge of the world. So thank you very much for this, Aziz. This should be up in a couple of weeks. These other episodes, we will announce that on Twitter and Facebook for the podcast, downloadable version of the podcast. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you all in the next pod. Bye.
Bye.